Why not go with court-martial?
Well, that is an option. It would not be strict courts-martial because it wouldn't be dealing with U.S. soldiers, but you would have something that would be parallel in terms of procedures to a court-martial proceeding, and that's one of the options.
We haven't heard much about that, though, today. We've heard about military tribunals. We've not heard about...
Right. Well, it's now an option that's in play.
Tony, could you go over what your understanding is of Lindsey Graham's thought?
I had a brief conversation with Senator Graham earlier. He has been arguing for some time that he thinks congressional authorization is required for military commissions, and therefore he is willing to go ahead and proceed legislatively. Beyond that, I've got nothing. I think, again, there are so many different pieces to this that you have a general proposition that members of Congress are willing to get involved and to work with the White House and the White House with them on congressional authorization if that is the proper way to proceed. But beyond that, and Senator Graham, I'm afraid, was sitting in the chair at the Senate until right before this briefing began, so I didn't have time to follow up. But I know that he and others at least have expressed some interest to try to figure out some way. And as you also know, he has been critical of the policy today. Go ahead.
Just a housekeeping question. Hank Paulson, do you have a date for swearing in?
No, not yet.
Can you put a finer point on the detainees that are held, the status? You said that you're trying to repatriate 100 of them. Then you said there's a core of them that the countries won't take back. How many would be in that category?
I think the number is between 50 and 100. But I'll tell you what, Peter. I'll try to get clearer guidance out of DOD. These are what you end up getting are ballpark figures, and so I don't want to nail that down as an absolutely precise figure because, especially with repatriations, obviously that number continues to go down. I will try to get a good answer out of DOD, and if so, we'll attach it as an asterisk to the transcript of this briefing.
And hunger strikes and other actions there, as you know.
Right.
Is there any concern that this ruling is going to embolden both the people being held and perhaps their allies in the greater world?
As you know, the people who are guards at Guantanamo and officials at Guantanamo have tried to take extraordinary precautions to make sure that the prisoners are safe, and they have gone back and revisited and tried to strengthen those procedures in the wake of the recent suicides. I don't think at this point the primary concern here at the White House and within the administration is to figure out where this ruling takes us. And as far as the ongoing operations at Guantanamo, again, you talk to the authorities there, they are very concerned about making sure that the prisoners are cared for properly, and so that's something that they care about every day. They constantly worry about that.
Thank you, Tony. It is reported that North Korea...
Okay, well, before we go to North Korea, let me dispense with all the hamdan case questions, and then we'll get to that. Yes.
I just want to clarify something from the press conference that the President said. He says some of them, meaning the detainees, some of them need to be tried in our courts.
Yeah, he was referring to judicial proceedings or equivalent judicial proceedings such as military commissions, perhaps courts martial, and we'll see how we proceed. No, not necessarily. Okay, let's...
The President and the Vice President and others in this administration have talked pretty forcefully. The President and the Vice President and others in this administration have talked pretty forcefully about the need for this President to have broad powers to prosecute the war on terror and how vital that is to winning.
Right.
As you point out, the Supreme Court has now disagreed. So is the President concerned that this ruling is curbing his power that he
No, I
needs
mean, I think
to
this
win
is...
war? I mean, does he not have any concern that the prerogatives that he's argued strenuously for are being basically rejected by the Supreme Court?
The President thinks of the war on terror, and I will, without having spoken for him, without having had a direct conversation about this, but by observation, the President thinks in terms of his obligations as Commander-in-Chief, not his prerogatives, but his responsibilities and the best way to carry those out. And when somebody says, okay, this is the box within which you must operate, then you operate within the confines. But the President, so the President's determination to prosecute and win the war on terror has not changed one bit by the Supreme Court opinion. He is still determined to do it. He's still determined to win. And he wouldn't be in it if he didn't think we could and would win. So, no. The answer is that there's not seen any sort of implicit curtailment of his ability to fight the war on terror.
Do you see a potential impact on things like the National Security Agency eavesdropping program and some of the other surveillance programs when the president used sort of the same rationale that he used with respect to Guantanamo when he talked about his constitutional authority perhaps being curtailed?
You know, I don't. You're talking apples and oranges here, Kelly. Well, yeah, you are. I mean, you're talking about entirely different sets of legal authorizations, and without getting into the weeds on it.
He also, in both instances, argued that the congressional use of force authorized it and his constitutional authority authorized it. And the court is saying that he still needs congressional...
The court is addressing this in the specific instance of military commissions, going back and trying to take a look at the history of military commissions. So it really is a far more specific ruling than that. It has to deal with the institution of military commissions, which goes back to the age of the Civil War. Jim?
I just want to make sure before we leave this, in terms of the options in the roads that the White House is considering traveling on from this point, we've talked about courts-martial or some parallel procedure. We've talked about the congressional authorization. Is there anything else as a possible road? For instance, civil courts.
I really don't know, and I'm not at liberty to go any further than I've gone. I think people are looking at everything that may be implied by this. Those are the only two roads I can take you down right now, Jim.
You don't think that this decision weakens the president's ability to wage the war on terror? I thought that was the whole point you guys went to the Supreme Court, because you needed this in order to wage.
We thought it was an appropriate way to bring to justice people who are not enemy combatants in the traditional sense. The conventions of war typically have defined enemy combatants as people wearing uniforms of a sovereign country, clearly marked, not committing acts of violence against innocents, and so on. I mean, you know the Geneva Convention language. And it was the interpretation of the administration that military commissions were historically and legally an appropriate way to proceed. What the Supreme Court has not said is you can't try them. It hasn't said you can't bring them to justice. I think now it's a question of how properly to do that. So it doesn't tie his hands. What it does is it doesn't serve as a rebuke. What it says is that the Supreme Court disagrees with the method that has been designed right now by the administration, and it says we want you to go back and consult with Congress. And that is, I mean, as I mentioned before, Jake, a lot of this seems to have to do with procedure, and so everybody's going to go back, and the lawyers, and I really would direct you back for further detail on this to the justice briefing, to figure out exactly what you need to do so that you can bring these folks to justice.
But I assume that the reason you were doing it the way you were doing it is because you thought that was the best way to win the war on terror. So doesn't, by definition, this decision weaken, in your opinion, your ability to wage the war?
It's really not important for me to give a personal opinion here. I gave that up when I came to this job. So at this particular, you don't think about it that way. You think, what is the proper way to prosecute the war on terror? To move from one way doesn't mean that it's the only way, and so there will be different ways of bringing these people to justice. It's got to be, Lester, it's got to be on topic.
No, yield.
Okay, anybody, let's make sure. Anybody else on the Hamdan case? All right, now we may get first, I'm sorry, we start here. Yeah.
Thank you.
Sarah.
Tony, you and other key officials in the administration say diplomacy is being used to resolve the North Korean missile crisis issues.
Yeah.
Would you be more specific?
No. No, I mean, well, in terms of, if you want me to be specific, you had the premier of China calling yesterday for the North Koreans not to launch a missile. We have had Japanese officials say the same thing. We've had contacts from South Korea. The other parties to the six-party talks have made it clear that the North Koreans ought not to do this. We've been using diplomacy through our partners and friends to try to persuade North Korea to come back to the six-party talks. I mean, it's really no different than what I've been saying every day here. So we have been pursuing diplomacy continuously. It was one of the topics that arose today in the conversations between Prime Minister Koizumi and the President. So there is an ongoing effort on the part of the President and also his designees, including Ambassador Schieffer, including Secretary Rice and others. So A lot of people have been active in trying to get the North Koreans to come back, so that once again they can join the community of nations and move forward on other parallel tracks as laid out in last year's September 19th agreement. Lester.
Tony, a two-part question. First, in Israel, WorldNet Daily reports that leaders of the 1,200-member Rabbinical Congress for Peace have called on President Bush to refuse to support Prime Minister Olmert's plans to evacuate most of Judea and Samaria. And my question, how has the President responded to this?
Believe it or not, I don't think he's seen fit to respond directly to that particular political statement.
Reuters reports that while the Pentagon no longer deems homosexuality a mental disorder, this reversal has no impact on U.S. policy prohibiting openly gay people from serving in the military. And my question, does this also accurately report the position of the Commander-in-Chief or not?
I will defer all questions about military personnel policies to the...
But part of the President, how does the President, has he changed his mind on this or not?
The President's positions on all these matters are well established, Les.
It is reported that the North Korean Human Rights Special Envoy Jay Lepkowitz is to visit Kaesong Industrial Park inside North Korea next month. Can you verify that report, and what is the purpose of his visit?
No, I can't, and I don't know. Cheryl.
Tony, on North Korea, the president came today to talk about cooperation with the Japanese on missile defense technology. Does he have something specific in mind
No, so as we announced earlier, there has been, I believe, and I'll have to go back, Cheryl, but there had been an announced, what was this, the Trident threes? Is that's something? I know that there's been some discussion. Rather than yeah.
Anything beyond that, and also.
I was not in the restricted meeting, so I don't know anything specifically that would have been discussed. I'll try to find out.
He was trying to send a message to the North Koreans.
Well, he was sending the message was that you cannot leave Japan unprotected, and Japan does not intend to remain unprotected.
On Iran, Iran is now saying that they're going to not have a response to the offer until August. The G8 wants a response July 5th. What happens if they do not respond by July 5th? Will steps be taken, or will you just wait until August?
At this point, the ministers at the G8 made it clear today that they expect to receive a reply through Ali Larijani to Ambassador Solana on the 5th of July when they meet. That has been described as the appropriate forum for providing an answer, and they expect to get a proper answer through those channels on that date. Richard.
Tony, what's the White House response to all that's going on in Israel and the Palestinian territories?
Well, a couple of things. First, there's pretty much unified international reaction, which is that Hamas needs to give back the Israeli soldier and needs to renounce terror, and needs to do so immediately. The second thing is that we hope that Israel, in trying to retrieve its soldier, will practice restraint, and that both sides will practice restraint in trying to lower the temperature and develop a sense of security in the region.
They've gone in and they made some arrests of some Hamas officials and government officials.
I'm aware of that.
Does the President endorse that?
We are going no further than what we've said, which is we're encouraging both sides to practice restraint.
Follow up, if I may. The President talked today about shared values and democracy in the Middle East.
Yeah.
These were elected officials, regardless of what other countries think of them. 64 officials have been arrested, including cabinet members, members of parliament. Is this a day for the United States to stand up for democracy in the Middle East, or does Israel get a free pass?
It's an argumentative question. I appreciate it, and I'm going no further than my prior statement.
Tell us a little more about tomorrow's event and how it came to be, and any machinations to make it all happen?
Well, you don't have to do a lot of machinations when you say the President wants to come to Graceland. All you have to do is get out of the way because everybody wants to be hospitable. Prime Minister Koizumi likes Elvis. He's made no secret of that, and so the President decided, he even did by the way, everybody across the room heard you cackling today, Lester. That was some guffaw. That was terrific. But as a matter of fact, the Prime Minister released a CD for charity of his favorite Elvis songs at one point. So, you know, these two guys get along well. They like each other. They work closely together. In many ways, Prime Minister Koizumi has been an incredibly effective partner with the United States in working together on issues of security and trade and cooperation. And not only has their professional association been warm, but their personal association. The president likes him. This is a fun thing to do, and so they're doing it.
Tony, the Memphis is under curfew. Does the president have any reservations about going there and taking up valuable police power at a time when the city is in a tense moment?
Well, that's a good question, and I will give you an answer, but I don't have one now. I'm totally stumped. Thank you. Yeah. Okay, I'll tell you what. We'll bring it up here. Do you really need it on camera?
Well, I wanted to know if you could share with us what the Prime Minister and the President discussed on the economic front. If beef came up, if they'll be having it for dinner.
Well, the Prime Minister had it for dinner last night. The President said he had it. I don't know if they're going to have it tonight, but they both had it last night. That was the way the President opened the press conference today.
And I'm also curious if they talked about the issue of Koizumi's visit to the Yasukuni Shrine.
Not that I'm aware of. Okay, I'll tell you what. Let's deal with the rest of these off camera. We'll go ahead. Thank you. I'll find out. I didn't even know about the curfew.
Yeah, drive-by shootings, shot.
Not good.